what is actually the impact on the body? What could go wrong?
Well, we know that many of the contaminants in particulate matter, air quality issues, can increase a lot of things. It's associated with increased risk for cardiovascular disease. It's been associated with mental health issues such as, anxiety and depression. We know there's associations. This has been well studied around the world in some of the most polluted cities in the world, that conditions such as Parkinson's, Alzheimer's, and early dementia. But we also know that it affects the immune system, which is the area I like to talk about specifically in the book. It is very inflammatory, many of these chemicals that get in through breathing, right? We're breathing them in just like oxygen, right? We can't go without oxygen. Well, what comes in with that air also is circulating throughout our body. And it can, in fact, increase the inflammatory response in the body. We have acute issues such as asthma, right? If you're an asthmatic and you breathe in some of the particulate matter, often in cities, but even in other areas, you can have an acute response, which is an asthmatic reaction, a spasm of your breathing apparatus. But then there's these chronic low-level exposures, again, that you're bringing into your body. They can be measured in blood levels and urine levels. And we also have a great opportunity to reduce those exposures as well. But health issues are real when it comes to particulate matter, and we should really pay attention.
Where would you rank it? We have a little photo here of poor indoor air coming through a vent. Where would you rank it? If you put tap water as an F, poor indoor air, where is that on the list?
I'm going to bump the D and I'm going to put it right underneath the water because it's such a major exposure into the human body.
So you're going to put it on a D?
I'll put it in D, and we can just leave it with the nonstick pans, of course.
Yeah, we're on the same list.
Why not?
As that.
Why not?
That's great. We are recording this in my studio in Los Angeles, this podcast, and in this studio, we've had to put a bunch of soundproofing in. Mm-hmm. A lot of soundproofing has polyester. You look at polyester and the chemicals that make it up, it sheds. It contributes to microplastics in the air. And that exposure, we sit here in this closed, insulated room for, 2 hours sometimes, 3 hours doing a podcast. It's all about health. We don't want our guests here, being exposed to all that. So in my office here in the studio, I have not only an air filter, right, which if you can afford that, it's always a great recommendation. You can also open your windows if you're at home and let the air circulate. You talk about that in the book. But we also have an air monitor because this space is so important. And the air monitor, we've set it to the setting that looks at not just toxins like VOCs in the air. It's also looking at, a lot of people don't realize that if you have a lot of stale air that's not recirculated, that is recirculated, you can have increased levels of carbon dioxide in the air. Mm-hmm. You can have, too high of a temperature, too high of a humidity. All those things actually make us less productive. It's harder to focus. Mm-hmm. There was actually a really great study we wrote about in our newsletter talking about how they looked at high pollution days in cities, and they looked at baseball games that were taking place outdoors. And on high pollution days in certain cities, I forgot which ones they looked at, they found that the umpires actually had a higher amount of incorrectly calling balls and strikes on those days because the suspicion was, at least there was a correlation, that these increased levels of pollution were actually making it harder for them to focus on those days. I found that super fascinating.
Oh, it's fascinating. And there's other data to suggest when, temperatures change, when ozone goes up in terms of its levels and there's a poor air quality, rating, that there's higher levels of admissions to the emergency room for psychiatric issues. There's fewer police stops. There's less inspecting of, our food when it comes into the country. So when you talk about productivity, you're also talking about sort of downstream effects that can affect all of us. But the productivity issue is a real issue when it comes to not just climate change and temperature, but also what's correlated is actually particulate matter issues.
Have you seen some pretty low-cost air monitors online? It's pretty easy these days. Do you have any buying tips for people that are out there?
The CO2 monitors are very inexpensive, and that's easy to pick up. What I found recently when I was researching the fire information in terms of LA's exposure, you really can think about your air filter in terms of what's called circulating air delivery rate, CADR, is what you want to start thinking about when you're looking at these. I mean, ratings are great, right? But if you want to actually look at what you're trying to accomplish, you want to circulate the air in such a way that it manages a certain space. So the active way to do that is to look for the CADR on a air filter, and look for 300 CADR for every 500 square feet. So the idea is you want to match the filtration ability to the space that you plan on using it for. So again, 300 CADR for every 500 square feet, and you would increase that for what you're using it for. The other thing you can really consider for those listening is the HVAC system in your home, right? You know, the HVAC system, heating and ventilation, an air conditioning system, you know, if you have vents in your home, you can change out what's called the MERV rating of the filter. And the MERV is I wish I knew the name of the acronym specifically, but basically MERV ratings are based on what you're trying to accomplish in your space. They're usually set as a default between 5 and 9 MERV, but you can move up to say 13, 14, 15, even 16, especially in areas where you've been hit with fires and smoke. And so you're creating a better system by which you can catch that particulate matter, and just make sure you're on top of changing them out regularly.
Yeah, I think that with all filters, air filters, water filters, these home filters for your HVAC system that have the MERV rating, I think the key really is changing them out regularly. I can't tell you how often somebody says, yeah, I have a water filter, and you're at their house, you're like, oh, amazing, that's great. You know, like, do you mind me asking, like, when's the last time you changed it? Especially after I taste the water, I'm like, oh, this tastes a little weird. Not that you can always taste it. And they're like, I didn't even know you had to change it.
Yeah. And not only that, I have a system for doing that, because I have a work water filter that's reverse osmosis under my kitchen sink, and I have a home one. And so essentially, I just time it to major holidays, which is kind of a bummer if I'm not invited to something, but I'm changing my filter instead. But really, if you think about it, New Year's and Memorial Day are really two opportunities around those times that are 6 months apart. And so I really actually make that a mission to keep on top of those two holidays. You can pick any holidays you want, but when you're talking about 3-month changes versus 6 months changes, if you tie them to things that have meaning to you, then you're more likely to stay on top of it. And I write down, you know, the date every time I do it, because you want to make sure you have that date so you can work off of that. And sometimes I forget, and I hope people who are listening are not forgetting like I did.
You have a framework that you talk about in the book. We're going to break that down in a second, because that will help people help them to figure out how to think about all this and how it all works together. So we'll come right back to the tiered list, but give us that framework, the 4 A's.
Yeah, the 4 A's was something that I designed because I teach doctors, I teach high school and college students. And after doing this a long time, you start to figure out, what is the simplest way to chop up this topic into a way that people can really absorb it. So the 4 A's are very simple. It's basically, number one is assess. You have to assess the situation to really know what you're trying to fix, right? So in the book, I have a 50-question survey that really just asks very basic questions. You give a 1 or a 0 answer. You add up those numbers to kind of see where you're starting from, which is reasonable and shouldn't be overwhelming, but it's good questions that everyone can answer. So assess is looking at the problem.
What's an example of a question?
Yeah. So do you filter your water? Do you dry clean your clothing? Do you travel through big cities to go to work or to home? I mean, these are all different, very reasonable questions about exposures that anyone could wrap their head around. And once you get a number, you can kind of say, okay, let's see where I can go with this.
Okay, great.
The second A is avoid, right? So we can avoid, I call it avoid and swap. But avoid is really, do we really need all of these cleaning products? A door cleaner, a window cleaner, a sink cleaner, a carpet cleaner. There's a lot we can cut back on that we've been marketed to in terms of keeping up with the Joneses in terms of cleanliness, antimicrobials, bacteria fears. We want to keep our microbiomes healthy, and we don't need all of these products that we've been told we do. So avoiding is one good way, like air fresheners and all that, but also swapping. Having the ability to swap out what we do like using to cleaner versions, making smarter choices. This is really part of this whole process, right? We want to keep some of the stuff we like. The third A is add, and this is really kind of critical because you can take away all the triggers, all the environmental chemicals, all the exposures that are harmful in the world. But what you also need to think about is how do you give the human body things that it needs to thrive at the cellular level, at the organ level. So for instance, there are nutrients in food that we now know not only help us nutritionally for growth and development, but actually offset the effects from harmful chemicals on our epigenome in terms of our gene expression. So we have food that is essentially medicine to offset modern exposures that we are now seeing. But we also want to add in things that help detoxify the human body. So sweating is remarkable. It's something we've held on to for millions of years. We want to add in great sleep. So not just quantity, which we all think about rest and feeling alert, but we also want to think about how do we get the best sleep so that we can clean out chemicals while we sleep through what's called the glymphatic system. It's the fluid around our brain and our spinal cord. And as we sleep, we're really kind of washing these out in many ways. Science is really robust on this. So adding in exercise, adding in sleep, adding in nutrition sounds very anthropologic to me, right? So that's the kind of things I want people to think about, taking away the problem and adding in solutions. The last of the A's is kind of, like this is life. It's called allow. That's the third A. And the third A allows someone like myself to go get my hair colored because I actually really want to keep doing that for a while until I change my mind. It's traveling to other countries and not having access to certain things that I might want to have, part of my life like I do at home. It's birthday cakes. It's anything that we need to really keep us motivated and know that this is not about perfection. It's about being realistic and having this process, removing these chemicals, detoxifying in a way that is personal and is a journey for everybody. There's no regret. There's no rush. It's a process that you layer in over time.
That's great. I love that breakdown. Okay, are you up for the idea of ranking a few more things?
Let's do it.
That are on this top toxins list and potentially some solutions as well too. We'll throw them in. You mentioned one, which is household cleaners, the standard ones that are out there. What is problematic about them? What ingredients are you worried about? And what is the impact of them on the body?
Yeah. So, we have a wild, wild west of chemicals that go into our personal care products and certainly in our cleaning products. Again, we are not required in the United States. The government does not require manufacturers to test any of the ingredients that go into these products before they go into our home and potentially into our bodies. And so the idea that anything can go into them really means that it could be thousands of chemicals and often are. So when it comes to cleaning products, a lot of things that are added particularly are phthalates, which are fragrance and odor, because we want to clean, with products that have, odors like lemon that may not be real, or ocean breeze, or, pumpkin spice when it comes to candles and cleaning products and those kind of things. So those phthalates actually are proprietary. They are not required to be tested again, and they extend the scent or the fragrance to have a longer shelf life. And phthalates are linked to a whole host of endocrine and immune system issues in the human body.
Like what?
So we know with phthalate testing and phthalate studies that are quite robust that they can contribute to changes in male genitalia from a newborn exposure or in utero exposure perspective. They've been linked to affect hormones like insulin, which affects sugar, thyroid gland. They can affect growth and development, fertility issues, but they can also increase inflammation. Again, from an immune system perspective, someone who takes care of immune and autoimmune disease patients for 22 years, these exposures are pretty, pervasive. And so we don't want phthalates in our bodies, especially during vulnerable periods of development. So as a pregnant woman, as a young child, into our teen years, and even during menopause. These are vulnerable periods where hormones are really going up and down. That's when many of these endocrine or hormone disrupting chemicals and immune disrupting chemicals can have greater effect. So we want to be thinking about that. But other chemicals in cleaning products, quats are a group of chemicals that were added particularly after COVID because they really went after the microbes. We were very afraid of microbes for good reason, right? We didn't want to have a virus affect us, such as COVID. So the cleaning industry went nuts. And they started putting in so many toxic chemicals that really wipe out the microbiome of our skin and can get into our bodies and can be measured in blood and urine. So again, there was a free-for-all. It's a wild, wild west. lots of chemicals we don't need. Let's go back to basics. Let's use things that our grandparents used. White vinegar, lemon juice, Castile soap, sea salt for scrubbing. And I even have do-it-yourself recipes for those products in the book. Or you can use resources that are in the book as well to choose safer, lower toxicity products.
So let's rank both of those. We have a green bottle here on the screen, which is representative of, traditional household cleaners, a whole classification. Let's rank that. And then we have another image that is baking soda, vinegar, all the good stuff that you just mentioned. You don't have to get all the expensive brands, although I super appreciate that there's a lot of alternatives that are out there that people can buy in the store. You can make things at home. Like you said, you have examples of that in your book. So let's rank both of them. So let's start with the traditional household cleaners. Where are we going to drop that?
I would put them, they're pretty gnarly. I would put them probably around F.
Okay, so you're going to drop it down there.
Yeah, I think so.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because they could be filled with all sorts of stuff.
Yeah,
it's
proprietary fragrance, antimicrobials, antibacterials, just real things that we don't want in our system anymore.
Got it.
Or ever. Yeah.
Okay, so on the flip side, vinegar, baking soda, some of the other things that you mentioned, where are we putting that?
Let's put that up at A or S. A is fine. Yeah, it's wonderful. I mean, these are the things that are harmless to the human body, been around forever, completely accessible, and completely inexpensive. So I'm a big fan.
When I first met my wife, before she was my wife, and I suggested, let's use some vinegar to clean, there was this initial reaction of, that doesn't actually clean. And I'm sure you've heard that before. For the people that are out there that are like, hey, this isn't a fancy thing made in a factory. Is it actually cleaning? What is your response?
This response is not only is it cleaning, it's actually antibacterial as well and antiviral. So when we're thinking back to, some of the most common exposures, the flu, there's lots of things that can be killed off from just white vinegar. But also, if you're thinking about that level of cleaning in terms of, say, COVID exposure or the flu in your household being rampant, you can also think of isopropyl alcohol, which is just rubbing alcohol. So there's even stronger stuff if you need it that's really safe as well. But vinegar is really classic. It's been around forever, and it has different percentages. There's sort of 3% for cooking and 5% for cleaning that's available even at big box stores. So if you're really going to be using it for cleaning, I would choose the higher percentage.
Awesome. I love that. Okay, let's go on to the next item that we have here. It was another thing that you just mentioned, which is personal care products. This is another whole slew of items. Could be sunscreen, could be body wash, could be anything and everything that people put on their body. And one of the suspicions from people like yourself is that potentially one of the reasons that women might have higher degrees of autoimmune disease, that it's multifactorial, could be this plethora of untested, unproven level of chemicals in traditional personal care products. Is that accurate? Hey, YouTube, if you enjoyed what you just saw, keep watching for more great content on how to improve your brain and your life.
So iodine is something that most people haven't really heard about. It's a micronutrient that protects the thyroid gland in order to sit in the thyroid and protect it from a lot of the chemicals that we're exposed to.